So our gospel passage this morning deals with forgiveness, God's forgiveness that is extended to each and every one of us. And it makes no difference what we have done. We are presented today in the gospel passage with an individual whose name remains nameless, whose what she did remains nameless. All we know is that whatever she did was wrong and strong enough that she faced some very severe punishment by the Pharisees. And so she knew this. She also knew that Jesus was present in that community. Although he was at a private dinner party, if you will, her desire, her faith, her guilt over what she did was so powerful that she was willing to break all kinds of social rules, if you will, and come before the Lord in a party or dinner that she was not invited to. That's exactly the setting which takes place in today's gospel. Knowing fully well that Jesus was present, she presented herself to him. And when she presented herself to him, her acts of humility, her acts of humbleness indicated her intense grief over what she did. The guilt must have been enormous, but she beheld before her God. Her faith was powerful and strong enough to know that Jesus could indeed bring her to wholeness, forgive her her sins, and allow her to be free. So she was willing to take that risk to break every social rule in Judaism in terms of social activity, and she did all that. Jesus forgave her. Sin no more, he says. Your sin, but more importantly, your faith has brought you to this point to know that I forgive you for what you have done. Very powerful example of not only Jesus' ability to forgive, but it mattered not what her sin was. That's the key to this gospel, I think. It mattered not. We're not told what she did. That's irrelevant. What is relevant is that she is in pain. She is carried a lot of guilt. She wants to have God forgive her. So she comes before the Lord for that to happen. What a tremendous act of faith. At the same time, Jesus' total love and forgiveness. And so that beautiful example that faith inspired her to do what she needed to do to be free from her guilt, to be free from her sin, becomes, I believe, the lesson for today's gospel. Sin is very powerful. Whatever the sin might be. Sometimes the sin is, well, all sin is sin because it deprives us of the presence of God. It sort of disrupts the journey towards God. Sin can be very, very destructive to us, depending upon what we may have done. Sometimes, in the course of our sinfulness and committing certain sins, we feel we are unworthy to receive the sacrament of the Eucharist, and so we don't. When we are in that state of severe, serious sin, we like to call it, we also call it mortal sin. The guilt can be pretty strong, depending upon what we may have done. But knowing that we have a loving God, knowing that we have a forgiving God, and this is where the lesson comes in. It doesn't matter what we have done. God's forgiveness is total. God's forgiveness is complete. God's forgiveness is free. The whole purpose of reconciling ourselves before God is to relieve ourselves of the burden that that sin has created in our lives. What that sin has done to us. It has stopped us from feeling at peace. It has stopped us from feeling free. It has stopped us from feeling what is true serenity. That's the power of sin that can have over us. But Jesus says, don't hold on to that. Don't allow that to burden you. Don't allow that to hold you back from experiencing peace and harmony. Come back, forgive. Have faith, and that's the key issue too. The other part of this, have faith that no matter what it is we may have done, no matter how powerful that sin may have been, God does forgive. That cleansing sacrament that we as Roman Catholics have called reconciliation is a beautiful sacrament of which we have that opportunity to feel his grace, to feel his power, to feel his forgiving spirit overcome us and make us forget, or basically be at peace. And that's the key to this. In our gospel passage, when this woman left her, now there is some speculation as to who exactly is this woman in today's gospel passage, and there are some scholars that would say this woman in today's gospel passage is Mary Magdalene, who would become an incredibly strong follower of our Lord. Whatever, the key is her sin was so powerful, her sin was so strong, but her faith was just as strong. She presented it all before God. Know that in God, who is Jesus, God can forgive, and he did. And when he did forgive her, she felt another sense of freedom, of peace, of harmony. Such it is when forgiveness is granted to us by God. There is no reason, whatever it is that we may have done, that holds us back from feeling that peace and harmony and that serenity. All we need to do is to follow example of this woman in today's gospel and turn it over to God. Receive his reconciling spirit. Receive his forgiving spirit. Know what it means to be at peace, to be at harmony, by feeling his grace through the sacrament of reconciliation. There is no sin that God will not forgive.